What's up, guys? Welcome to the second episode of Ironverse Uncut. Today on the show, we have JoJo Ntiforo. He's the very first IBBF pro to come out of New Mexico and as well as compete on the Olympia stage. I'm super excited to have him on the show today and for you guys to hear his story. Now he runs Team DarkHorse, where he coaches both lifestyle and bodybuilding clients. Nice to have you on, JoJo. Super excited to have you, man.
Thank you, bro.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, super excited to learn about your story and your journey to the Olympian stage. You know what I mean? This is super exciting. I guess the first question I have for you is, what did it really cost you to become JoJo?
So when you say cost me, you mean, I'm not assuming you mean financially, you just mean...
Yeah, just in terms of like mentally, physically, like what are some of the things that it took for you to become who you are today?
That's a good question. Interesting question. It's a lot of sacrifice. I mean, it costs, I could say in a lot of ways, it cost everything.
Yeah.
But there were so many things that I had to sacrifice, so many, and as you get to a higher level, you have to kind of narrow things down even more. So what did it cost me? I mean, it cost me everything, but it was worth it. I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah, I like that answer. When you do something important, oftentimes that's what it is. It costs everything, but the result is way better than what you had before.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Is there a specific thing about your journey that most people think they understand well, but they misunderstand?
There's a number of things, a lot of things, but it's I guess one of the ways I would kind of answer that question is that you really don't realize how important it is, the people you have behind you, the support, and the flip side, the lack thereof, that can make or break a competitor. You could be the most gifted, the most hardworking, the most disciplined, but if you don't have, or I should say, if you allow the wrong people into your circle, it can tear things down pretty quickly.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. It's who you have around you is one of the most important things to anyone, even in your circle.
Right.
Yeah. What is a part of your story that looks glamorous from the outside when people are looking in, but was actually very ugly in real life?
Maybe I could go all the way back to my first show. Winning the overall at the New Mexico. It was 1999. So kind of lets you guys know how old I am. I prepped for that show, and whereas a lot of times, you realize, you have your mom, your dad, everyone there. That show, I kind of had to isolate myself, and this is not in any way a bad thing because I love my circle, I love my family, but you kind of realize really quickly that you have to put yourself first a lot of times. There's the whole thing where family comes first. You might have issues on the side and you get pulled away. Hey, your brother needs you for this. And as much as I'm always there for family, if I had done certain things differently back then, we wouldn't be doing this interview now.
Yeah.
You kind of have to realize that, you put 100% into yourself because you can, at least in my case, I knew that I was going to deliver rather than put it into someone who maybe I'm just going to drop the ball. It sounds kind of selfish, but that's a lesson if you want to be the best.
Yeah, that's what it takes to be the best, is you have to cut out those distractions.
Right.
Because every moment you spend doing other things is a moment you're not focusing on what your goal is.
Exactly right.
What's a hard truth about bodybuilding what's a truth about bodybuilding that you had to learn the hard way?
Let's see. As far as the competitive side of bodybuilding, this is at the higher level, you realize that the more money is at stake, the more you have to play the game, if that makes sense. Yeah. It's not like track and field where whoever crosses the line first wins. There's a lot of times there's things behind the scenes that you learn, and you learn, for me, a lot of it I learned after the fact, toward the end of my career. But there's people who are willing to do whatever it takes, and sometimes if you have the right people in your corner, the right sponsors, the right financial, it kind of fast forwards things a little bit.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, other than being at the gym, I'm not in the bodybuilding scene at all, but I've heard that quite a bit.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
that's almost a political game in terms of the sport.
A lot of it, yeah. Especially now we've got social media. You want to if you want to be a competitor and you want to be really good, you kind of have to, you've got to make yourself a somebody, in the eyes of the fans, because at the Olympia, the fans are the ones that, that are buying the tickets. If they love you, then they're going to want you at the Olympia. If you're somebody who nobody knows, it's a kind of a different story.
Yeah. In your mind, what separates average people from elite people?
100%, I would say that's a mindset. The mindset at the upper level, it's all encompassing. You got the genetics, you have the mentality, but at the initial, it's the mindset. It's the willingness to, being able to endure when we're in the gym, go past, you push your body to a point where, most people would quit.
Yeah.
And then that's the lesser part of it, because then it becomes the diet, the nutrition, the discipline. I have been doing this at the level, when I started, it was pretty much, it was only bodybuilding, and then the other divisions kind of branched out. So it was at a level where everyone had that hardcore mindset of just suck it up, tough it up, And as we get to this time, I'm realizing that a lot of people want to be competitors, but they don't realize that that's first and foremost. You can't make the diet the way you like it. You have to do a thing that works.
Yeah.
Sometimes that means that you got to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, that's very true. What would you say is like one of the biggest things that you've sacrificed in your career so far that most people would never agree to give up?
Well, for me, I've sacrificed a couple of tendons. My both triceps were torn off the bone, tore the quadricep off the bone. These things most people would say, hell no, I don't want to be part of that. But It was all, and it was just trial and error, learning as we go. I think part of what makes me such a good coach, not to toot my own horn, but I think one of the things I take pride in is that I've made the mistakes. I didn't have the easy path. I mean, I've had to learn from my mistakes. And so I tell people, if I can cut that out for you and you have the mentality and the genetics, we can kind of get you there a lot quicker than I did,
Yeah. Yeah. That's what in most circles, whatever success it is in bodybuilding, business, or whatever it is learn from the mistakes of others so you can avoid them.
Right.
You save a lot of time.
Right.
But I think there's also something to be said about learning for yourself.
True.
As well.
True.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. Sometimes that's necessary. And sometimes even as a coach, I can kind of see things that maybe I would navigate the right way, but I said, okay, let them kind of slip up and then we'll discuss it after the fact. Because then they learn it for themselves, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times it's like, they say it's been said forever, but it's like, well, if you tell someone not to touch the stove, they might not listen. But if they touch the stove, then they'll listen.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Yeah. What is something that you feel like made you dangerous before you became successful?
As like a competitor, that kind of a
competitor, and just in your mindset and in business with your coaching business, just something that kind of helped you stand out from the rest before the success showed up.
That's kind of cool, because I think a lot of times those are the things that mold us into champions or create that mindset. As a kid, I was my mom was very, very strict. I always kind of make fun when I was a kid. She bought me a step stool because I was too short to do the dishes. So I wasn't given any slack. It was a very disciplinary thing at the house with my mom especially. And then there was a period of my life where much later, when my mom had moved away, that I had to kind of endure, and just it was a tough time. I don't like to talk about it because everyone wants to say that, but it was rough. And I think that when bodybuilding came along, I realized, well, geez, if this is what it takes, having to be strict with your food and lifting weights, is like this is a joke compared to what I've been through. I can do this all day. I can outdo anybody in suffering, kind of a thing. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that does. Yeah, if you had to describe your journey in one sentence, what would that be?
In one sentence, I would say it was difficult, enjoyable. Highs and lows, a lot of highs and lows, a lot of shifts in my circle. Things have changed 100% in my mindset. If I could take the mindset I have now and go back to that beginning phase, it'd be a seriously difficult. It'd be a dangerous athlete. But of course, you can't do that. Hindsight's 20/20. You just have to kind of take it. But you know, the mindset, all the things I've learned, if I could have known that back then, it would have been pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now I want to kind of start getting into like your origin and like how you grew up and things like that.
Okay.
And so I guess the first question in that is like, where did it really start for you in terms of bodybuilding? But where did you really, begin to see, hey, this is something that I like. This is something that I want to pursue.
So it started all the way back. I was one of those kids that, just a roughhousing kid. I'd want to be the strong kid. I was always challenging kids to arm wrestle, challenging them to a race. I wanted to be the strongest, right? My heroes were, as a kid, were the Hulk, all the strong superheroes. And then I got to a certain age, and my oldest brother had gotten into bodybuilding. He was lifting at a local gym. The district chairman of bodybuilding at the time, Clark Sanchez, he owned that gym. And so it was a really hardcore gym. And he started getting really serious about it, putting the pictures of the bodybuilders on the wall. It goes all the way back. That's why I kind of am a historian, because I started learning about it back then. Chris Dickerson, Casey Viator, Mike Metzer, Lee Haney, Sergeant Debray, all those old school guys.
Yeah.
And so I started looking at him and thinking, man, that's amazing. That's like these superheroes, but in real life, And so my motivation to do that even started back then. I was probably in third grade. So obviously I wasn't going to be, but I was always trying to be strong, do push-ups. And so that's kind of where the mindset of bodybuilder kind of got into my head. So it was at an early age.
Okay. Yeah. When I was researching, it said you grew up in Ghana. Is that correct or no?
That is kind of correct. So I was born in Ghana.
Okay.
I was born in Ghana. I moved to the States with my family. All my four of my older siblings. I have one younger sibling, and of course my parents. The younger sibling was born here, but the 4 or 5 of us came over when I was 2.
Okay.
So I don't really remember. I haven't been back, but I don't remember. But my family is Ghanaian. They have again, it's just a very strict upbringing.
Yeah. And so where were you raised here?
I came to pretty much from the time I was a kid. We were in Albuquerque.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my dad he had gotten his PhD, and he became the director of he was an art teacher. He started teaching art at the university at UNM.
Yeah.
And he liked just coming to the States. He liked the diversity of New Mexico at the time, and so we moved here at an early age. And so this is pretty much all I know. I lived in Albuquerque on the east side for a while, then the west side, but I've been out here since I was a baby.
That's awesome. So you already touched on this, but what values from your upbringing still drive you now? And I know you talked about, how your parents raised you, and especially your mom being strict on you, but was there any particular things other than that you look back at and you're like, this is something that I still hold with me today?
You said values.
Yeah.
Pretty much mainly like you just said, the discipline of things when I was a kid. I would say pretty much mainly that. That's the thing that kind of I can hold on to.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Was there, or did you always feel like you were born for greater things, to be super successful?
I did. From the time I was a kid, I felt, I was always an athlete. I knew there was something I was going to do. If I was going to do anything at the upper levels, I wanted it to be sports. I ran track and field when I was 4th grade. I went to the nationals in 5th grade. I'd won the regionals in Tucson. I went to New York with my dad. My dad was actually a really great athlete. He was an Olympia in 1960 in Rome.
Wow.
He competed in track and field, 100-meter dash. He met Cassius Clay at Olympic Village. That was, of course, Muhammad Ali.
Yeah.
When Muhammad Ali won the gold medal that year. So my dad was a great athlete. I'd look at the pictures in the photo album of him, and so I always felt, I was always a fast kid, and I thought that was what I was going to do. But I knew something physically, and I had an older brother who would always kind of remind me, hey, anytime I get in trouble, I was like, no, you're meant for bigger things. So it was instilled in me early that I wasn't just going to be doing regular stuff.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to be a 9-to-5er. At least not. I didn't think so.
Yeah. I think that's how most people, not all, but most that find success, they've been driven at it for their entire life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there anything that you can remember specifically, like struggles in your life early on that kind of shaped you and got you to where you're at?
Yeah, there's a lot of them. I mean, so many little things, from being really young. You kind of asked me earlier, how do I pronounce my last name? It's a very different name, So I remember elementary school, back then the teachers would announce, call the kids out in alphabetical order. And I knew when they were getting to N, I was like, here we go. They'd butcher the name and just all these things, all the other kids are laughing. So that, and also I think we came to this country, we didn't have a lot of money at the time, right? So my older brothers, they were, two of the older brothers were probably 7-8 years older than myself. So we got hand-me-downs. And so I'm going to school at the time in clothes that were probably, from the 70s where I'm, so it was between the last name and that, I got a lot of so I had to get strong. I had to become tough and learn to deal with it and develop thick skin and, sometimes, throw hands, but for the most part, it was those early things kind of made me tough.
Yeah.
Tough. Kind of make. I always kind of felt like I can deal with whatever. Throw it at me and I'll figure it out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. So, can you remember a specific person? I'm sure, obviously, your parents, but besides them, that believed in you very early on.
Yes, probably the person who had the most influence on me was my older brother, second oldest of my brothers, Kelly. He was the guy who kind of steered me early, guided me, just kind of, encouraged me. And he was the guy that probably got me believing early on that I was going to do great things.
That's awesome. Is there anyone that doubted you early on?
Yeah. You mean like when I started actually my journey, the bodybuilding journey?
Yeah, maybe either or in your childhood when you were growing up or right when you started your bodybuilding.
Okay. So is it in my childhood? Probably a lot of people, because, it's just like, who is this kid? He thinks whatever, So that was normal. I didn't really think too much about that. But as I got further into it and started getting into the scene and getting ready for my first show, it was interesting to see, the dynamic. There was a lot of support. Don't get me wrong, a lot of support. But there was also a lot of, okay, this guy thinks, early on, guys who had been doing it longer than me, guys who I looked up to, I was getting a lot of comments. So part of that, it was nice. It drove me. It made me want to show everybody that, hey, look, I can do this.
Yeah. Was there anything like early on before bodybuilding that you were chasing? And I know you talked about, you always thought you would be a successful athlete, but what about that success kind of drove you? What was enticing about it to you?
It's okay. I don't even know if it was more, I can honestly say it was never like financially driven. I never thought, I want to be driving these expensive cars. It was kind of, it's weird because even as a kid, I felt this way. It was more the legacy of it. Like, we only live for so long, but if I can do something that puts my mark out there, then people are going to remember it. It's going to be a part of history. And so that was for me a huge thing. Even when I studied bodybuilding and studied the national champions, and where am I going to fit in all of this? I spouted off like, just because I'm a fan of it. The first 1982 national champion Lee Haney. Sean Ray, 1987 national champion, Vince Taylor, 1988, Kevin Levrone, 92. That was probably the most competitive nationals of all time. So I kind of knew ahead of time in my head thinking, okay, this is going to be my spot. I'm going to be whatever year. And, so it was, when it finally happened, it was surreal. It almost kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, this can never be taken away from me. I don't care how much money so-and-so has. This can't be bought,
Yeah. It takes a lot of hard work and dedication to get there. Yeah. You kind of already touched on this, but when you very first started bodybuilding, like, how did it enter your life? Was there a moment you can remember where you're like, this, I'm all in on this?
Yeah, I can kind of break it down for you. How I'll sum it up pretty quickly. But so I started out probably as a 14-year-old kid. My older brother bought me a weight set, the one that I kind of told you about. He got us a weight set and a punching bag, and we would do that in the garage. My brother and my sibling. He's the one that's closest to me in age. We would do that together in the garage for probably a few years. Developed a good physique, and then went to the gym and started training. And from there, we started seeing there was a gym out here in Rio Rancho, out where I live. It was called Champions Gym. Long since shut down, but there was an owner. The owner was a firefighter, big guy. You'd go upstairs and see pictures of him next to Mike Matarazzo and next to Kevin Levrone. He was a competitor. And I remember always going up there, picking his brain. I thought, man, I want to be like this guy. I was probably a junior in high school at the time. And it was cool because he would always, he'd always be very inviting, talk to us about everything. I never asked him about anything at the time performance enhancing. It was more about how do you train, how do you eat, what do you do. So at that point, training in that gym, we would go downstairs and see guys pulling their shirts off, hitting poses like in pumping iron, and I thought, man, this is the life. I want to be in this, So I knew that from that point, I started training toward wanting to compete. I did my first show from that point, probably 10 years later. So I built a pretty good foundation.
Yeah.
Where, see a lot of guys now and they just get a gym membership and say, hey, look, I want to do this show. It was different back then, because there was no classic physique. There was no men's physique. It was only open. You don't want to get up there and look small. So I put on a pretty good amount of size. By the time I did my first show, I was good enough to be able to take the whole thing.
That's awesome. Yeah. What do you feel like your first prep that you ever went through for that show? What did that teach you?
That taught me, that was the biggest one because, and this is kind of cliche, you hear it all the time, but you get to that point where it's like, man, it's just not working. What am I doing? Maybe I should but you just keep going. You just keep going, and suddenly you break through that sticking point and you're thinking, man, most people would have quit back then. And you see the things that, so then it kind of trains you to just keep push through. It's almost like, it works in anything in life, right? It's like that time where it gets really tough and you want to quit, and by the time I got to the show, I had gone through so many of those sticking points that getting there, I was confident it didn't matter who showed up because it's like I couldn't have put anything more into it. If somebody beats me, I'll shake their hand,
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree. And I think that's what most people miss when they're trying to become successful in whatever it is they give up too early. They're like right there, and then they're like, I'm going to try something else.
Exactly. That's almost always it, And if you push through, that's what it kind of it taught me. And so that was the toughest prep. Once I had that blueprint, I realized I can do it. My body's been there. You never doubt yourself again.
Yeah. And you said you won that first show, right?
I did. I won the overall. So it was back then they did the New Mexico and the Mid USA on the same day. They'd run the New Mexico and then they'd do the Mid USA right after it. The Mid USA was regional, so then they would invite people from out of state where the New Mexico was just state. So it was always usually the same New Mexico competitors plus more. So I won the overall at the New Mexico, and then the Mid USA there was a big guy from Texas. His name was Troy, good friend of mine still, and he ended up edging me out for the overall at that one.
Okay. Yeah.
But I kind of messed with Troy. I was like, well, now I'm an IFBB pro, and you're on this side. But we it's all in fun. He's a great guy, and he was the first guy. Kind of he beat me at that show. But from that point on, I just like I told you, I shook his hand and said, hey, look, man, you're because I put everything I could into it, and we're still friends to this day.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's cool. That's one thing I think I really love about the sport that I've seen kind of getting into the scene of it is how deep the friendships can go because you guys are living the same lifestyles and you're doing the same things. And
exactly. Those are the people you have the most in common with at that point. How are you going to not like these guys? We're all a little crazy to push ourselves to that point, right?
Yeah. Were there any mistakes that you made that you feel like you made early on, like in that first prep, in that first show?
I don't know if I'd call them mistakes, but there were things that you learn that you can't do again.
Yeah.
That first prep, I didn't have the knowledge that I do now, but I knew I was going to do whatever I had to do. So I was doing cardio. I remember going back to some of my track days and running sprints, running hills, bleachers. I was going 0 carbs, for days in a row. And it worked. And I used that with clients sometimes, but after my body got to that point, I couldn't prep that way again. My body was, it's almost like burning that stubborn body fat at the beginning. Took certain things, but once you're down and even if you gain a little bit of fat, you don't need to do that to get there again. It's probably overkill.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, stubborn fat can be hard to burn, but when you're doing it every year or whatever, every couple of years, it becomes easier, I'm sure.
Exactly right.
Was there anything that you believed early on in your career that you now know is very naive and that you don't subscribe to anymore?
Yeah, a lot of things. Cut your salt, boil your chicken. You can't, sodium is your enemy. Nonsense. It's probably one of the most important, minerals considering what we're doing, sweating and losing all that water, so that was one of the things I learned that I kind of was making mistakes with early on, just not knowing any better.
Yeah.
Even right up to the show, cut your water, you've got to restrict your water to, just ounces of water, on Friday, the day before. I've done all that stuff. And what happens is you look phenomenal a week out and you look phenomenal 2 or 3 days after. But that time where you're depleted and dry and dehydrated, you look flat and you can't feel your muscles on stage. And so these are all things that, they're even written like this is how you prep for a show. And I realized, okay, some of that is valuable and some of it's garbage, it's just not true.
Yeah. When do you feel like people started to notice that you were different, that you weren't an average competitor, that you were going to go to the highest levels of the sport?
That happened for a lot of people, and it built my confidence. It happened early. After winning that first show, there was some local guys that had been doing it for a long time. One of my mentors, his name is Don Gouch. He had won the Mid USA, in 1989. Big guy, strong as an ox. I would see him benching 500 pounds for reps at the gym when I was a little kid. So growing up and then him seeing me, I told you when I was in high school, he'd see me in the gym and kind of like, what's this little guy doing? And so he saw me win that show and he said, you're going to be the first of us to make it. You're going to be the first of us to. I was like, what do you mean? And he's like, you're going to be an IFBB pro. You got everything it takes. And so that was early on kind of like, okay, man, this guy, he didn't have to tell me that, and then going to California and started to do shows and getting a name for myself out there. Because again, the last name is difficult. So people would say, it's that dude, it's the guy with the last name. They'd be whispering, and I was like, okay, they know who I am. So I kind of knew at that point, I'm bringing something special, to the table.
That's awesome. Yeah. So in your early climb, what do you think was like the hardest thing for you? Was it money? Was it training? Was it food? Was it recovery? Was it your beliefs? What do you think was the hardest thing?
It was money for sure. It's expensive sport. I wasn't making much. I was working as a bouncer at different, the nightclubs at Billy's Long Bar, the Zone, all over town, downtown at the time. And so you make only so much, food is expensive, supplements are expensive, supplements are also very expensive. So it was money. And then the other thing was, again, I kind of go back, some of the people in my corner, at the time you don't know any different, but you realize after the fact that maybe they're not in your corner as much as you thought they were, so you trust in certain things and you make, you learn from your mistakes. But yeah, that was, I'd say the lack of people behind me considering, I've seen a lot of guys who are, coming up in other states and it's like, man, the district chairman's got them, all these other people from the gym are like, yeah, you're going to be the next. Where for me, I kind of felt like it was a pretty lonely road, but I don't complain about it. I love it because it built a lot of character. Yeah. But it was that, and then absolutely the finances. It took a bit to, travel because once you win a state title, you're not competing in the state anymore. I wouldn't win the New Mexico and then come back and, I'm 2-time Mr. Like, no, you move on to the bigger shows. And so if you're moving on to the bigger shows, every show is a plane flight, a hotel, rental car at entry, all that stuff. So it's not cheap.
Yeah. Yeah. It's I don't think a lot of people understand how expensive it is. I didn't even at first. I was like, oh, you just go on the show, you know what I mean? But
right.
Like you said, traveling, the tan, the food, everything, it adds up.
It does,
very expensive.
Yeah. Not so much the tan for me, but
yeah, that's true.
But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. At what point do you think that you became more than just another guy in the gym? And it was probably when you won that first show, but when do you remember a moment when you'd walk in the gym and people are like, oh, JoJo's here?
So like you said, a little bit after that first show, it was cool to get that, man, this guy, he's Mr. New Mexico. I did a few California shows and started really developing a pretty good reputation. but it really hit when I won the nationals. That was the biggest one, because it was unexpected for most people. I mean, other than myself, I felt very confident going into that show, but it wasn't, it wasn't expected because nobody had done it before me. Up until that time, nobody had won the nationals and become IFBB pro out of the state. I had done the USA's the year prior, and I'd made top 5, and that was huge because there was 44 guys in my class. I asked the judges, "Hey, what's the feedback?" They said, "You have insane shape, you have great condition, but you're too tall." I was light heavy at the time. I weighed at 197, believe it or not. So they said, "You just got to get bigger." And so that was the thing that I think at that point was really the time that I realized, okay, I'm going to be a pro. I'm going to knock that door down, because there was a lot of resources I hadn't even tapped into as far as, supplementation. And I was like, okay, I'm already top 5 at the USA's. They're just telling me I need to get bigger. And so from that, the next year I grew 220 the next year at the USA's. I ended up coming down 5 pounds and winning the nationals that same year. But the nationals, after coming back home from that, it was kind of cool because there was not social media or internet so much. It was more magazines. Yeah. So I remember, Flex Magazine, Muscle and Fitness, Iron Man Magazine, Muscle Mag International, all featuring, this, they're kind of saying JoJo won the, this is cool. So people are coming to the gym with the magazine. Hey, can you sign this? And it was at that point that I realized, okay, man, this is pretty much what the whole thing I've been dreaming of as a kid. I'm living that life kind of now.
Yeah, you made it. Yeah. What do you think that most young athletes get wrong about getting their name out there and about getting their name known?
I think it's pretty common, and I was very guilty of this, is that you just become a gym rat. You focus just on, I'm just going to grow, just wait. They're going to see me. I'm coming, and you just, you become this perennial long, off season bulk guy, that's going to, you gotta be in the moment, you gotta be ready to, obviously you do have to, put on size and you have to have an off season, but even that you want to put out there. You want to show people your journey. Yeah. I was not good at that. I have my wife to thank 100% for that, because I was that guy. I was like, I'm not worried about that. They'll see when I hit the stage. They're gonna, but no, you have to kind of let people know you're coming, get people behind you, following your story, and I think that's, if you want to be a bodybuilder who's doing it and making money off of it, because you only make so much off the prize money. You got to make yourself marketable.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Marketability is, I even said this on the episode with Jordan, but today's currency is attention. And so if people have their eyes on you, then you're good to go. But if not, it can make things a lot harder.
Exactly right. Yes.
So I guess the next question I want to ask you, I want to kind of start getting into more questions about you competing. But what placement meant the most to you so far in your journey?
If I had to pick one, I would have to say, even though I didn't place in the top 10, it was the Olympia, because I was on that stage. It was surreal. That was probably the moment where, of all the shows I've won, I usually, am I going to break down? Not so much. The Olympia, I broke down backstage, and it was just, from the time I was a kid, I would watch the videos, even when it was on VHS. They would play that music, the intro, Joe Weider's Olympia song, and I'm like, and then I'm hearing that song in the background, and here I am, and so that was number one. Yeah. That was number one. After that, probably the national championship, because again, I surprised a lot of people. I was, that's kind of where the dark horse began. Nobody saw me coming. I was coming out of Albuquerque. People hadn't heard of me. I was going against a lot of sponsored athletes, sponsored by Muscle Tech. I'm seeing them in the magazine spreads with Mike Dragna and Abbas and Marcus Haley. All these guys are known, and I know about them because I'm a student, but they didn't see me coming. And I walked away with perfect scores, and they call them down 5th place and 4th place and 3rd place. But they called 2nd place. I was like, okay, wow, this is when I IFBB pro, Yeah. So that was number 2, I'd say for sure. And then I'd say a third, just because I think it was my best showing, my best physique, was the Chicago Pro 2014, the year I qualified for the Olympia. And that was a cool one because kind of the same thing. They knew of me, but they didn't see me coming. Rolly Winkler, the Beast, he's known. He's a phenomenal guy. The guy with the huge arms. He was the favorite going in. He had suffered a motorcycle accident, I think, several months before. So they were wondering if he was going to bring it, and he needed that show to qualify. They had just filmed the movie Generation Iron with Phil Heath, and if you ever watch that movie, Rolly's the guy who's training with that older lady. They call her Grandma. She was like real hardcore. So he was a big name at this point.
Yeah.
And we hit that stage, and I'm in Chicago. Nobody knows me, but I hear all the Chicago accents yelling my name, yelling my number, and so they had me winning the show. Eventually, Rolly ended up edging me out, but I think for me that was a win. Because I'm battling this guy, and most of the guys out here had me beating him, and I was a fan of the guy, so that was huge.
That's awesome. Yeah. Is there any shows that you feel like placements in any shows that you feel like kind of hurt?
A lot of them, yeah. I've had some bad places. I've lost more than I've won, but when you say hurt, like I felt like I should have done better.
Yeah, like a specific one where you're like, man, I should have done better. This hurt. I feel like I did better.
I don't know. I mean, there's some that I definitely, and probably a few of them that I would go back to this day and say, man, I don't see how they saw it that way. But nothing that I would really complain too much about, because, it's part of the sport. I get take it on the chin because I know that whether I win or lose, my goal is to get better anyway. So I never really took the losses that badly.
Yeah, no, that's good. You got to take it on the chin and get back up and keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was there any specific show that you remember where you're like, okay, I can compete with the pros. I'm at that level.
Yeah, that one would probably be in 2005, the Ironman Pro Invitational. Huge show at the time. It was one of the most popular shows. The inaugural show for the year, it set off the year right. It was, I think, a week or two before the Arnold Classic. And so many big names would enter that show. Flex Wheeler won that show numerous times. Chris Cormier. So I wanted to do well at that show, and that was my pro debut. And I remember getting insanely good feedback from guys who I had looked up to. There was a guy named Samir Banu, Mr. Olympia, 1983, and he was telling me, man, you have amazing shape. You could be at the top of the sport. And this is my pro debut. Rich Gaspari, it's kind of cool because he actually told me this story after the fact. Rich Gaspari, if you guys probably know who he is, but he's third place at the Olympia 3 years in a row in the 80s, and now he owns Gaspari Nutrition. But he was at the show, and he told me that he was talking to Jim Mannion. And when I got up on stage, Mannion, they were kind of talking, and Mannion stopped and said, who the fuck is that guy? And Gaspari told me that, and I'm like, oh, man. Of course, Jim Mannion's the president now of the organization, the IFBB. So at the time he wasn't, but that was huge for me because that told me, man, these guys are taking notice. I am bringing something special, even amongst the elite.
Yeah, no, that would be really cool to just hear. You know what I mean? You're like, wow, these big guys and big names in the sport are starting to recognize me.
Right? Yeah. It was encouraging. That was a huge moment for me too. That pro debut. Of the three shows I mentioned earlier, that was probably in the fourth.
Yeah. What did repeatedly competing and going to shows kind of teach you about yourself over time that you were like, oh, okay, this is something I didn't know before continuing to do this much?
It taught me that I'm stubborn and resilient. I don't do well with losing, and I don't do well with losing, especially if it's something that I was in control of. I almost consider it worse to lose having done everything I could have and been at my best, and this guy just placed ahead of me, than even to win and know that I could have done things. I screwed some things up along the way. So it's almost like every time I want to, let's fix it, let's do it again, let's fix it, almost to a fault. Sometimes you have to shut it down, but for me it was just I'm relentless. I'm not going to stop.
Yeah, wanting perfection.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. What do you think separates a good bodybuilder from a dangerous one that gets to the level of being in the Olympia?
For that, I think to be at that level, you have to be very regimented to the point where you're okay with, living a boring, just doing the same thing over and over, because that's really what it takes. if you want to be the best, there's a level, I think, after which, at least during prep, where you just have to be tunnel vision, boring, do the same thing, have the same meals. And even when it gets to the point where you almost want to do it more than the next guy. That's, for me, it was always like, is so and so quitting? Is so and so doing? No, I'm not. I'm going to be the guy that comes up for air last. If I have to pass out because of that, that's okay. So I think that's what it takes. You have to. But then when you have that mindset, because I have a couple of clients, they know exactly who I'm talking about, who are just, I'm going to do this to the point where I pass out. But then it's nice to have somebody on the side, who can control that, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't have that. Sometimes that's probably why I had so many injuries. It's like, I'm going to go until my body breaks, and of course it did.
Yeah. No. Yeah. No. I think that's a hard thing when you get in that place, is you just want to continue to go and continue to grind. And like you said, you have to allow your body to recover and allow your body to rest at times.
Exactly. Yeah. Even step back and review, and okay, let's come up with a game plan. That would have been nice to have that. I got a little of that guidance at the end, guys who had jumped on board and helped me out. George Farrell was a very good coach. I'd worked with him during that Olympia season. I'd worked with a guy out of, at the time, Phoenix, Scott Stevenson. He is actually a Masters competitor. It was a Masters competitor at the time. He'd won the local show. And he's very knowledgeable on a lot of things that I hadn't even delved into. Yeah. So, he was a good, there's a few guys along the way that have kind of really taught me a lot, whether it's just other competitors or guys who also, we're just coaches.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like for you that it's easy to kind of turn off that switch? Like when you're out of your prep and you're after the show, or even like when you're in a season of not competing, to kind of be able to relax a little bit more? Or are you just kind of always on and always strict diet and strict training?
It's slowed down a lot. I've gotten better at that, especially now, but even at the end, I realized that sometimes you need that balance, but you have to be able to, turn it on and on the flip of a switch. Yeah. But you do need a certain amount of balance. You do have to be able to take yourself to that place, But I learned later that balance is key. Balance is key. It helps you to be a better person at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's like anything. You can have a really good thing, whatever it is, even water, for example, but too much of a good thing can be bad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Do you plan to compete again?
My wife is sitting right over there. So the answer is no. Seriously though, I've gotten everything I can out of it. I think for me, the hard part about giving it up, because it's in my blood. It's hard. I always want to chase something, but the reality is that I've had so many injuries and little things along the way. It's just you can only do so much, because if I'm competing as an IFBB pro, and I don't like to compete. I don't want to try to get up there if I can't be what I've been. If I've been at my best, you don't want to get up there at less than that. So
yeah,
for me, it's the lifestyle. I'll never stop lifting weights. It's therapy for me. It's my happy place. So that's something that will never stop. The eating, I just it's the way I think. You have to have protein. You have to eat a certain way. But the competitive side of it, I've let it go, and every day, it's hard. If I could somehow magically make injuries go away, I'd probably still do it, just because it's the way I'm wired. I've got to be trying to beat myself and be whoever. I'm a competitor.
Yeah. Yeah. After doing it for so long, that makes sense. So that it's just it's your love. That's what you love doing. Like you said, it's your passion.
Yeah.
So I can imagine it's hard to give up. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to kind of dive more back into the Olympia a little bit and talk some more about that stuff. So take me back to like 2014 and what it really felt like stepping on stage.
Oh, that was cool. It was amazing. So I'll go just a little bit back. 2013, I had done the Dallas Europa. I had placed, I believe, 7th. It was a good placing. It was a really deep show. Going back to the question you asked earlier, I could see that show being one where I was like, okay, I definitely should have placed higher. I was, the top 5 guys, I could have seen myself better than any of them in a lot of shots. Top 6, I should say. And that was what was interesting. They called out 6 guys. And then I was called out in the 7th group. Then I never really got to compare to those guys. So it was like, put me next to them. But the feedback was that, hey, look, this is the best we've seen you look. You've been hit and miss for a little bit here. So this is one of those things. If you can bring this kind of look back consistently, you're gonna get there. Yeah. And I thought to myself, based on this prep, I can bring this look and then some. So the next year, I got into training. It was like my best training camp probably ever. I had my nephews, my wife. We were just going in at 100%. I had a good crew that were trying to beat me. My nephews at the time were big kids, and so I had to make sure that even when I'm depleted, I'm crushing them in the gym, and going into that first Europa, that's where the whole DarkHorse thing came along. I went into that check-in. I remember things with the diet I'd learned is to cut out the cheat meals this far out. That year, I remember, I think 2 weeks out, I'd done a cheat meal, and if you guys look, I think I have it on my Instagram or my Facebook. There's a picture of me taking a photo of myself, and I've got my Ghana phone, and just looking like an anatomy chart. Skin is no skin, just big and shredded. That was the day after my cheat meal, and my cheat meal was always the exact same thing: burger and fries. It was boring. But the wife asked, "Okay, when are you cutting the cheat meals this time?" I was like, "You know what? I'm not going to cut the cheat meals. I'm just, why would I do that when I always look my best the day? I don't look like this during the week." So we ran right into the show with that. Just first time I'd really gone ahead and said, let's just try this, at least successfully, because I tried a lot of things prior. But that one, I worked, and we went to the check-ins, and I remember walking in. We ended up showing up late. Wife was stressed because we were fighting traffic, and it was a blessing because I walked in, and everyone was like, "Wait a minute!" They looked over, and I've just a regular, I think it was like a red polo shirt on, but I was busting out of that shirt. It was cool because even amongst the competitors, and a lot of them were depleted, tired and sunken face, but I looked like I was ready to explode. And so I went up to the front to kind of talk to the judges and get my information, my number. And I remember Big Steve Weinberger, he's like looking at his paper. He looks at me, he looks down, and he looks up again, and he gives me the nod and the handshake. And I was like, okay, that's all I need to know. Because Steve Weinberger, he is the judge. If you get that from him, that means a lot. They were doing the lead up to the show, and Bob Ciccarillo and Sean Ray were talking about who they thought were the favorites. And Bob said, that guy JoJo Ntiforo, he's the dark horse from this, So I mean that's a common thing that people use. But then they played on it for a while. Sean Ray said, yeah, he's definitely. I saw him at the athletes meeting. He's as big as a horse, and he's definitely the darkest guy in the show. So I was like, these guys are talking shit, but I like that, because they gave me the nickname, and then at the Olympia, Bob brought it back up. Hey, JoJo, are you still the dark horse? And so that was where Team DarkHorse kind of started.
That is awesome. Yeah, I want to definitely get into Team DarkHorse, but I want to keep asking you a few more questions about Olympia. So, when you qualified, what was your first real thoughts? I'm sure when you got on stage and you realized you qualified, you had all these thoughts, but what was your first real oh man, I'm in the Olympia?
So this was an interesting one because back then it was a point system. Yeah. I don't think they still do it anymore, but they did a point system, and the way it worked is that if you accumulate so many points by the end of the year, you're in. So I had done the Dallas Europa. I had placed third at that show. But I think that, no, I got fourth at that show. Okay. Sorry. I got to the Chicago show. That was the one where I felt like I should have won. The fans felt I should have won, but Rolly won. Yeah. I'd placed there, and then we got on to Sacramento, and I got a really good placing in Sacramento. And so I hadn't won. And so going into the Olympia, I didn't know. There was one more show in Tampa, and I thought, well, depending on how the points go there, we'll know if I'm in.
Yeah.
But I got a call from none other than Flex Wheeler, FaceTime me. And I'm thinking, what the Flex Wheeler, I answer the phone. He says, listen, man, I was asleep, taking a nap. He's like, boy, wake the fuck up. You're qualified for the Olympia. I was like, no, what are you talking about? I'm not. We have to wait. He's like, no, I just had lunch with Robin Chang. We did the tabulations. You can't get knocked out. You're in. So I'm thinking, oh, my God, I'm in the Olympia. So I just started I'm celebrating. He's like, yeah, right. We kind of we had our thing. I hung up the phone. And then I'm thinking to myself, man, my body is so freaking tired. I've done 3 shows back to back. I started dieting in January, and we're here coming up on September. I've been dieting since the beginning of the year. I've been shredded since the beginning of the year. I've been on compounds for the beginning of the year. So I'm like, man, I don't want I don't want to get on stage. But at the same time, I'm like, but this is the Olympia. There's no way in hell I'm not doing it.
Yeah.
So I called the wife and told her, listen, it was a Thursday, I think. And I said, listen, can you, first I told her I was qualified.
Yeah.
Then I said, can you grab me some Cold Stone and grab me a burger from, I think, I don't remember, but I was like, I'm going to finish off the rest of this week eating whatever. And then starting on Monday, we're starting prep. I think we're 4 weeks out. So it was surreal. It was crazy. And then, so that prep was, at that point, it was just like, this is the peak. I couldn't be happier. The prep went well. My body was a little tired. If I were to say my best showing that year, it was probably Chicago. Europa, and well, actually, all the other three were all pretty comparable. But I wish I could have brought Chicago to the Olympia. But that said, I brought the shredded full look to every show, and the Olympia was a good one for me too.
Yeah. You placed 16th, right?
Right. It was actually tied for 15th, which was, it was not, I mean, it was one of those things that it was my first time at the Olympia. Again, looking back, should I have beaten this guy? Should I have beaten this guy? I think so. But hey, I'm not complaining.
You made it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's awesome. What do you think that it teach you, the Olympia, being on that stage, that local wins or even bigger show wins couldn't teach you?
I guess for me at that point, it's like, you never know. I'm at the top. Nobody thinks they're going to be there. I didn't start this journey out knowing I was going to be here. There was no guarantees. So it's like, you just have to trust and go for it, and that's the only way you're ever going to get there. You can't hope that someone can promise you this in order for you to give 100%. You just give 100% because who knows, here I am, at the top of the sport, ranked in the world now because I just kept going and didn't listen to the negative, the naysayers, the you can't, there's no way, that's impossible. You just that taught me that it's possible.
Yeah. I think most of the time, anything you put your mind to, if you truly are working hard at it and you're dedicated and you're disciplined, it is possible.
Yes.
Yeah. Do you feel like the dream of being on the Olympia stage, being an Olympian, and the reality of it was the same?
Yeah, I think it was. It lived up to everything that I would have hoped. I mean, for me, again, like I said, even feeling physically worn out, tired, beat up, as soon as you walk out from behind the curtains and you see, it's not like any other. I mean, it was at the Orleans Arena in Vegas at the time. I think it seats 10,000. It was so big. The stage was huge, and all you see, as far as you can see, is just lights and people and photos. So there was no way that it could have been any of a bigger. It was like it couldn't have been any better for me.
Yeah. If you could talk to yourself back then, like if you could talk to yourself right before you went on stage, what would you tell yourself?
I don't even know. I don't know what I would say. Even going onto the Olympia stage.
Yeah.
I mean, I would probably just say, "Hey, man, you made it. You did what you came to do. You served notice.
Yeah. I think that speaks volumes because a lot of people would probably say, "Oh, you could have done this better, or you could do this or do this better," but you're happy with where you got and you don't have regrets, which is awesome.
No regrets. No, it was, for me, it was such a different type of a journey because by the time I made it to the Olympia, I had torn tendons, I had, injured this, injured that, but it was like, but I won't quit, I'm going to keep going. So if you want to say, when was my physical peak? I don't know, before injuries maybe, but the more I learned, the tougher I got mentally, the more it was like, that mindset that's why I said if I could take that mindset before the injuries, it would have been pretty cool because you just get tougher and tougher and tougher and, more disciplined and more knowledgeable, so I don't have any complaints. The journey was exactly what I would have, I mean, there's always, hindsight, but the journey was amazing. If you change certain things, you never know if other things would have happened. So
exactly. Yeah, that's the beauty of it. A lot of times is the journey and learning from what you could have done better. You know what I mean? But like you said, if you were able to have the same vision you have now and go back, things would not have been the same.
Exactly.
Not felt the same.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah. I want to start talking a little bit about kind of like the sacrifices and the costs that bodybuilding have cost you. So what would you say is like one of the biggest things that it's cost you personally? And you kind of touched on it, like having to cut people out and stuff. But do you feel like there's anything specifically where you're like, man, this really cost me personally, even if it might have been worth it?
me look back. I mean, as far as relationships, I wouldn't go back and change that much, because what happens is that, things get exposed. So I mean, if I hadn't done bodybuilding, maybe I would have still been blind to certain things. So I wouldn't say, other than I mean, my body getting broken down a little bit, and actual financial. I'm not too. I can't look back and have too many regrets as far as, oh man, I wish I hadn't.
Yeah.
I don't think that I can think of anything off the top of my head.
No, that makes sense. That's good.
Yeah.
How lonely can it actually get? Again, you kind of talked about this, but in the prep and when you have to cut people out, how lonely can it actually get?
It gets very lonely. It gets isolated, and if you're not that kind of a person that can just be by yourself and do your thing and be in your own head, and you know then it's tough. I've had clients that have told me things like, oh, I just can't, I need to, I have to look, they need that companionship. Yeah. For me, especially during that climb, I was fine, doing my own thing. There was a period of time when I was working at the bars, and I would get out of work and I'm hungry, so I'd shoot over to IHOP and sit at a table by myself, and buddies would come in partying. What are you doing by yourself? Hey man, I'm good. I'm heading out. I'm going home. I just need to get some carbs. I mean, I'm going to train legs in the morning, and so it's not too bad, because you're on your own schedule. You do what you got to do. You don't have to worry about answering to anyone, or being afraid you're going to hurt anyone's feelings. But it is, if you can't embrace that, then it's very tough, because it's isolated.
Yeah.
Or at times.
Yeah. No, I agree. I can't even imagine at times. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you feel like, or do you ever question whether it was all worth it or not?
Oh, I mean, not really. Sometimes, when I'm, in a bad place mentally, but not really. I was kind of think, this is what I feel like maybe I was meant to do, and it's taught me to take it to the next level, and now help others with it, and it's built a lot. There's so many mental lessons and character building things during my journey that I don't have any complaints. It's definitely always been one of those things I could say it was worth it.
Yeah. Do you think there's anything, and you've talked about it, mental resilience and all those things, but you've kind of had that since you were a child in terms of how you were raised. Yeah. But do you think there's anything that you gained that made it all worth it?
At the end, like going through the journey?
Yeah.
I did. I gained confidence. I gained, not that I wasn't confident, but I was very introverted for sure. As a kid, I was not that guy that liked to speak in front of people. Yeah. I was shy, I kind of would tell people that when we'd have to do like a speech in front of the class for whatever, I would sometimes just not go to ditch the class. I didn't like that. It would cause me a lot of stress. But I think the journey helped me a lot with just being somebody who could, be in front of people and kind of teach, and I'm a lot more comfortable. And I think just the confidence of, hey man, I've established myself as something that, you can't be taken away. It's not fake. It's not, it's there. It's, I don't have to say it. You can look it up. Right. So there's a certain amount of confidence that comes with that.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah. Just achieving what you worked your whole life for.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a truth about bodybuilding that most people don't want to hear?
God, what would I say? There's a lot of stuff, but what would I put out there that would be a truth? Well, I don't know if it's what most people wouldn't want to hear, but it's definitely something that not everyone can make it. I mean, there's a huge genetic component. Let's be honest. I mean, mindset is one thing, and that's the most important thing. And I always tell people, no matter what, you're going to be in a better place than when you started. You're going to build yourself. You're going to become a better person and a stronger person. But there's no guarantee you're going to get an IFBB Pro card. That is reserved for the best of the best. And sometimes you have two people doing the exact same thing, equally disciplined, but this one is just gifted. I've seen it locally. I've coached athletes, and I'm thinking, wow, this guy or this girl is a freak of nature. I don't know why they have this kind of development at this age, or, and those are the people that usually will get to that elite level. Yeah. So if there is a truth, it's like, not anyone can do it just because you want it bad enough. I mean, that's kind of a shitty thing to say, but it's the honest truth.
Yeah. Yeah. You talked about it right now, just about how much genetics play into it. And I think that's a huge aspect. Do you think that there are certain people that they blame it, like certain things that they're doing where they're blaming it on their genetics, but it's actually their mindset and what they're doing that needs to be corrected?
That's huge. Yeah. And that's a fine line, because a lot of times that's a crutch. Like, oh, I just can't because of, you don't know until after the fact. You really don't. I mean, I wouldn't have known if I hadn't pursued this, that I could be, 200 and whatever, at my peak. I think I was, 290. And I mean, how the heck would I have known as a 175-pound kid that I could do that, or anyone know that about me until I did it? So genetics are not something that you can see ahead of the time, to a certain degree, right?
Yeah.
I say, if you're that kid who, gets picked first when you were in PE, who's can do the most pull-ups, you're probably gifted, but you don't know what somebody can accomplish until after the fact. And that's kind of where the genetics maybe come into play a certain degree, but you're 100% right, is that work ethic trumps it every time.
Yeah. Yeah. I forget the name of the movie. I can't believe I don't remember it, but it's that movie where he's the young guy and he wants to be on the football team at college, and he just working his heart off every single day. And he never gets there. And so I think you have to know yourself and know, okay, is this something that physically and genetically I can do? But if it is, then it doesn't matter what it takes. You have to work hard to get there.
Exactly. Even if you're gifted and you're made out to do that, and you have the tools, you still have to put in the work. And it's kind of a cool thing, because it's across the board. Not everyone's made to be a pro bodybuilder, but at the same time, I always kind of give people the example. You've probably heard it 100 times, is that I was a good basketball player as a kid. I could dunk as a sophomore, but I wasn't going to go to the NBA. I mean, I wasn't that good. That's reserved for people who are, unbelievably good, and most of them, a lot taller than me. So, there's certain things that we're genetically cut out to do. And sometimes that's an early lesson figuring that out. Some people try to do this, and if they're honest with themselves, they know this isn't what they were made to do. So you got to kind of be honest early on and pursue what you're gifted at.
Yeah. What is there a specific thing you can think of that you would say is like the most overrated in the fitness industry right now?
A thing? Are you talking about like a supplement?
Like a trend, a supplement, or a specific type of training, or a specific diet? Just something that gets a lot of hype that's not actually all it's cracked up to be.
Let me think about that. I know I've talked about that before, but I don't know. I mean, because I think everything may have merit to a certain degree. I don't want to, I tend to train a certain way. I've always sworn by, for the most part, progressive overload, train heavy, push, at least early on, to build that tissue. But at the same time, there's a place for all different types of training, time under tension, high volume. It depends on the phase that you're in, probably, in your training, I think, and also what you respond to most genetically. What works for me isn't necessarily going to work the same for the next guy. So I wouldn't really tear down anything as far as that I can think of as far as a trend. I don't know. I don't want to miss. I don't want to. Like, I think, I don't want to tear anything. I have some things I'm kind of laughing about, but not really. I honestly, I think everything has,
a place.
That place.
Yeah. Do you think that there's something, and this can be in bodybuilding, business, whatever it is, relationships that people say that they want, but they don't actually realize what it entails, and they don't actually want that if they knew what it was?
I think so. In all of the above, right? There's a certain amount of commitment that it takes, and a certain amount of really paying attention to it and feeding it and giving it, it's a lot of times people say they want it, but once they have to, do the thing and do it correctly in order to get, to win at it, they realize, oh, I didn't know it was all that. Yeah. I think with bodybuilding, when I have clients that tell me, hey, I want to be a pro, and I was like, okay, I'm going to treat you like you want to be a pro. And then they realize, wow, I didn't know it entailed all that.
Yeah.
Same thing with everything, relationships, you've got to treat it with respect, and you gotta put into it constantly.
Yeah. What do you think is something that most competitors are too soft about, that they don't take seriously enough?
I would say the diet, but no, I think it's the training. I think that I came up at a time where you have to train hard. I think now so many people are like, oh, I gotta, let me just go and say it. I got a Planet Fitness membership, and I just, I do this and this on the, cables, but I want to do my first show. I was like, you need to build a foundation. You've got to get in there and you've got to train. The kind of training that I did as a kid, to get to the pro level. Granted, it was open bodybuilding, so that's the biggest division, and there was nothing in between back then. So it was like, I have to be a monster. I see Kevin Levrone guest posing at my freaking show at 260 ripped. I'm like, that's what I need to look like to do this. And then, so it was all about what I'm doing in the gym. And so for me, I watched what Kevin Levrone did, what Ronnie Coleman did. I did, and I was like, if I want to do that, I have to be able to do something similar to that. So, I mean, if you go back and look at my videos, I was pushing, 4 plates for sets of 12 on the bench, no assistance, squatting 550 ass to grass, pausing at the bottom, no, because that's what I felt you had to do.
Yeah.
And maybe that's extreme, but, I went from 170-pound high school kid to, 290-pound bodybuilder. That's how you build. And then everything works around it. If you're training hard enough, you feel yourself a certain way. I would never have this guy who doesn't put in work in the gym eat the kind of calories that I was eating, because I needed those calories and it was productive. So if that makes sense, I think this is the center and everything revolves around it. There's the supplements, the eating, all of that. I mean, if you want to do it at the highest level.
Yeah.
So I would think that's the thing that most people today are soft with. And I've had it with clients putting them in the gym. They're like, whoa, that's what I have to be doing. I was like, this is just the start. We're not even where you need to be yet.
You're just getting warmed up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think there's a truth that you can think of that might lose like fake fans and people that are just watching but would gain you real respect that you haven't shared before?
I mean, probably the obvious, I would hope it would be obvious, is that, at the elite level, especially at bodybuilding, maybe not at all divisions, but there's a side to it. It's not just creatine and vitamins. There's things that you have to do to try to be the best, or that you are going to make you competitive at that level.
Yeah.
And so I learned early about anabolics and how they work in the body. I remember as a kid reading up on them. Man, this is, I'd have books. I still have them at the house. Some of the clients will see them when they come and visit me. World Anabolic Review, Anabolic Reference Guide, all these things. And I read them cover to cover well before I ever did anything. I had a guy at the gym, kind of a mentor early on, that he was a big dude. He'd come and train, and I didn't know who he was at the time, but he started talking to me and my brother at the time. Was at Gold's Gym, and Lebanese guy. Originally from France, represented France as a bodybuilder, and he was comparing me to Vince Taylor, and I was like, man, he knows who Vince Taylor is. He's like, I beat Vince Taylor at the French Grand Prix, and I was like, who the hell are you? And I realized he was a pro. His name was Nordine, and he asked me at that time. He's like, okay, what are you taking? Because I was pretty big. We'd pose in the gym. We'd all strip down to nothing, and we're hitting our quarter turns in the middle of Golds. It was a hardcore gym that way. But he's like, so what are you taking? And I was like, so right now I'm on creatine and I have vanadyl sulfate. I've been doing whey protein. He starts laughing at me. He's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah.
He's like, what are you actually taking? And I was like, nothing. I was like, and I hadn't at that point. I was like, I'm not on anything. I kind of have read up on it, but I want to get to the pro level of doing it and doing it naturally. And he's like, no. He's like, you're a genetic freak, but he's like, so the guys that you're competing against, you're not gonna beat those guys if they're doing, this and this, and you're not. And I remember the thing he told me, he's like, you don't take a knife to a gunfight.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me, I was like, okay, so I realized that, I continued to train naturally because I didn't think I'd reached my point where I would need to. And I wanted to max everything out. I think my thing was when I can put 405 on the bench and push it up without any help, nobody's hands on the bar, then I think maybe I feel like I've put myself at the point where I'm at a point of diminishing returns. Maybe I can delve into that at this point. Yeah. And so I did. That was in 1997.
How old were you?
I was 24 at the time.
Okay.
24. No, I was 23 at the time. 23. I did my first cycle, and of course you don't know anything. It was injectable stuff, and Peribol from France. It was the cream of the crop. So I took it, and my brother and I were looking at each other, an hour later. It's like, what do you think? Stupid. We didn't know anything. The next morning we woke up. It's like, I feel different to you. And so we just kept going, doing it. And, probably 2 weeks later, we figured, okay, we've been covering up, going to goals, not showing anything. Let's go to Liberty, and strip down. And we had some friends at that gym, and we got the reaction like, what the hell, dude? What are you? You're a freak. You never look like this. And I was like, oh, okay, it's working,
Yeah.
So that was one of those things that, I started out after I'd pushed my body to the point where I feel like it was ready for that. I think that's where most people make the mistake is, hey, can you get me on this? It's like, what are you doing? You're still skinny. You don't even have any business.
Working out for a week, bro.
Exactly. I think that's especially now because it's a little bit more out there as far as that information. A lot of people, that's the first thing they want to go to. Is like, I just got a gym membership and I want to do a show in 12 weeks. Can you get me some Winstrol's? Like, dude, no.
Yeah.
It's just, I think people have gotten impatient. I told you I didn't do my first show until 10 years of years of training, putting in time.
I think that's what social media does to us. It makes us want that instant gratification that when you see these big guys online that say they're natural, or even just see a lot of physiques and you want that.
Right.
But you're not willing to put the work in.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It skews a lot of things. Unfortunately, I've got so many clients, they'll pull up a picture of I don't know, I could name whoever, but like a popular influencer or something. And like, oh, he looks good. Do you think he's natural, or do you think she's natural? I'm like, God, no. Yeah. It's like, are you sure? I'm like, come on, seriously, But I think that it's hard to gauge all of it because this is a taboo subject. Mm-hmm. They're seeing all this, and this, but they don't know that some of the other things are going on behind the scenes that they're not probably going to post.
Yeah,
But at the end of the day, it's like you've gotta love it, and you gotta do it because you love it, not because you're looking for this end result, because those are the people that fall off.
Yeah. And I love what you said about do your research first, right? If you're going to put something into your body, you want to know what you're doing, and you don't want to just do it because you heard something on social media or this guy at the gym told you to do it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. It's a dangerous thing. It's a scary thing, especially for women.
Yeah.
For everyone, of course, but for women, because with what we're doing is male hormone, right? It's or synthetic derivatives. So if guys are taking male hormone, they're going to be more masculine. If women are taking male hormone, they're going to be more masculine. There's certain ones that are stronger and or okay to take. I always compare it to, painkillers. So you have aspirin, you have, ibuprofen, but then you have Dilaudid, you have freaking, so there's levels of it. Certain things that may be in the same family, but they're not the same thing. So a woman can take this, but whereas a guy would take this and it would react very similar in us, it's not going to react similar in you.
Yeah.
So research, have access to that knowledge.
What do you think about peptides?
I believe peptides are, they're the new thing, and they're not actually really new. I mean, come on, they've been around for a long time, but they're the new thing as far as
new trend.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's so many of them. I think they're really good. I think there's something for everything. There's been a pretty good amount of research on them, and I've experimented with them and gotten really great results depending on what we're, I told you I've had 2 tendon tears, and I remember running, back then they didn't call it the Wolverine stack, but it was TB 500, BPC 157, and along with human growth hormone. And my doctor, was shocked at how quickly I was recovering. It was weeks and several weeks ahead. Every time I'd come back and visit him.
Yeah.
So they definitely work. And I think that there's definitely a place for them in this industry. I believe in that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I want to personally do more research, but I think that's one thing that people misunderstand is, it's this new thing, when they've really been around for quite a while.
Yes.
And so they have a lot of research behind.
Right.
Yeah. Now I want to kind of start getting into the Team DarkHorse. So what is Team DarkHorse for you? What is it really about?
So for me, it represents, for me, what my career is kind of encompassed, just that going in and putting in the work and not necessarily going out there and talking a big game, but letting your actions do this, the talking, and, kind of coming in and shocking people, which is what I kind of felt like was my reputation at certain parts of my career, right? So that's kind of what it represents. It's an elite team. I want it to be considered an elite team. Of course, as a trainer, I train athletes and coach athletes across the board. But when I call them Team DarkHorse athletes, there's a line. And it's not everybody that I coach is Team DarkHorse, but the people who are doing it in the way that I kind of push as far as competitive side, and even some of them who aren't bodybuilding competitors, but athletes who are pushing the envelope, willing to take themselves to the extreme and trying to be their very best. Then it's like, okay, I can help you with that. I think I have the blueprint if you have the desire, the mentality, and so I want it to be considered the best of the best.
Yeah. Did you have a coach throughout your bodybuilding career?
I've had some. I've had a few on and off. Early on, it was just the big guys in the gym giving you advice based on their experience and feedback. This is what you do with your carbs. This is what you do with your water, and you just learn. And then, of course, reading. Whether it's reading, Flex magazine, or reading books, anatomy, nutrition. So I learned a lot just kind of doing it that way. And then I've had guys who would coach me. Some of them were mainly just as a second set of eyes, and someone to kind of make sure that they're giving me we're getting two approaches to the same problem or whatever. Yeah. Some of them were that. Some of them, like I said earlier, taught me a whole lot, things that I hadn't even delved into that I learned and kind of had to adapt to myself as well. But I've had a few really good coaches, and for me, it takes a while to learn somebody. So. And it takes a lot to know if this is the person who you were. Everyone's different. I'm not the coach for everybody. I've had some really good athletes who I've worked with who didn't do as well when I was working with them, and now they're flourishing. So I'm not saying, but I do know my stuff, and I do know that I can get you where you need to go if you have the mindset for it.
Yeah. There was a girl at our gym last night, and she was saying just that she had to get rid of her old coach and that finding a new one. And she said, I hate that the most is coach shopping, because she's like, most coaches are great, but it's finding one that you mesh with and that you pair with well.
Exactly. That's huge. It's huge. Just even the energies that the personalities. So sometimes it's as little as that, but for sure, I feel like the blueprint is there. If I have the athlete that has the desire, and we evolve as coaches and athletes as well, right? So there's athletes who I think I didn't coach the way I would have if now that I have different knowledge. So, I think it's important to have a good coach, especially in this day and age, because it's different with people be wanting to expedite the process and get there. It's like, well, I did a lot of trial and error, but if you want to get there quicker, you might want to have somebody who can guide you.
Yeah, who knows? Do you think in today's bodybuilding world that most people or all people need a coach?
Most people probably need a coach. I think most people do. I think it's beneficial in so many ways. Even on top of just all of the things you can learn from a coach, I think there is that accountability. There is that. For me, a lot of times when I got to the Olympia, my biggest thing was I wanted to shock him with my checking pictures. Oh, wait till he sees this. He's gonna, and I would get those reactions sometimes. And so I think there is that. There's that. Okay, I can't get complacent because this person has to see progress from week to week to week to week.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So you kind of already touched on it a little bit, but what do you think is the type of team you're trying to build and the athletes you're trying to build through Team DarkHorse?
So for me, it's trying to, again, like I did with my own career, I want to stamp something down that people are going to remember. Okay, these guys, they were known for bringing it. They were known for being the best. I've coached, I have to ask my wife, but I think 13, 14 IFBB pros, and legit, you see these guys on Instagram, I've got 100, but no, you don't. You're full of shit. Yeah. You don't have 100, but that's what they do to try to make it seem like they've done more than they have. I can name all of my clients and I can show them from where they started. I wasn't taking guys who were national level, third and fourth, and then turning pro. I'm taking people that when you look at the before picture, like, I can't believe that person was ever even going to become that, So I want to kind of be established as, I was the first IFBB pro out of the state. I want to have, dozens of IFBB pros that I've coached so that New Mexico kind of is on the map now. You know, when I went to Texas, when I first started as an amateur, there was all these pros. You know, I went to East Coast competing in amateur shows, all these pros, California, but there was nobody in New Mexico until 2002. And then after I did it, I coached a girl. I was in Phoenix, Tomei. She was the first women's physique pro. I coached Tracy Williams. She was the first figure pro. I take it back. Shalako was the first figure pro, but she was coached under one of my athletes, Levi, at the time. So I kind of started bringing them on, So obviously there's a lot of really great athletes out of the state that I didn't coach, but the majority of the pros are my clients.
That's awesome. That's a big thing to be responsible for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
What type of people do you refuse to coach?
I'm learning now. It's been a learning experience of, first I was taking them on, and I realized, okay, a lot of this is just a big waste of time. So we kind of have a screening process to a certain degree. It's just people that aren't willing to, to get out of their comfort zone, because this is really what it is. You have to grow. You have to realize that's you don't grow there. I've had clients that come and tell me, I want to get ready for a show. Can you put me on a diet? And I'm like, here you go. Oh, but I don't like this, and this, and this. Can I make my diet this? I was like, so you're going to give me your diet? Okay, well then what do you need me for? I'm not doing that. It's got to be, it's not just the way you like it. It's the way it's got to be the best. And that's never, I won't say never, but most of the time, especially if you don't have a crazy metabolism, you have to be a little uncomfortable at times, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think both of these things are super important. But to you, what do you think matters more, a potential or discipline?
Ooh, that's as a coach.
Yeah.
Damn, that's a hard one. No, it's not, because discipline is the thing that is rewarding for me. Because if they're willing to do everything that they need to do, they're going to max out whatever it is they have, whatever that potential is.
Yeah.
And that's a beautiful thing to see, okay, this is where we started. This is where we are now. And with that, it's not just the look, it's the physical, it's the confidence, it's they grow, they level up, and for me, I love seeing that. It's almost it's almost miserable to see somebody with all the potential, but they just don't have it. They won't give it 100%. There's been pros like that, you're like, this guy should be Mr. Olympia, but what the hell, and they find out he just doesn't follow his diet. He doesn't, he doesn't train hard. So definitely potential. I take that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's an
age-old potential, the discipline. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and it's an age-old saying of hard work beats talent every time, and that's because you could be the most talented in the world, but if you don't put in hard work, it only takes you so far.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the worst thing as an athlete. I would think, that's how I felt, because I know there's guys who were probably more gifted, but I was always very gifted when it came to just being an athletic guy. So it was hard to lose to somebody who I felt like I was more gifted than. It's like, what am I doing? So he just beat me outright then.
Yeah.
So that you never want that, Hard work will always be talent. Hard work, discipline. And so I would choose that 10 times out of 10.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, you have a God-given gift, and then you just let that potential go to waste. It's a sad thing to see, and it happens a lot.
A lot, yeah.
Yeah. What would you say is the fastest way for one of your clients to lose your respect?
The fastest way for one of my clients to lose my respect would be kind of just, I would say not being honest with me, I think is huge, because, we all slip up, we all make mistakes, but you got to share, if you're paying me, you got to share with me so that I can help you.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, we can figure it out. But if you're not telling me the truth, then what are we even doing?
Yeah.
And a lot of times I've had this happen, and this is annoying because they'll ask you to update. Can you fix it? It's not working. I was like, but are you following it? They won't tell you that. Oh, no, I'm following it. It's not nothing. Can you just change this? Can you change that? So they're wasting my time. That's the quickest way for a client to get fired.
Yeah. What's the quickest way for them to earn your respect?
Most of them, and some of them have done this, is like the mindset, right? They don't tell me, and they don't talk about what they're going to do. They just show up, and I'm like, wow, how in the world did you make this much progress in a week? They're like, I just did the thing, and that's for me huge. 2 or 3 check-ins like that, and right away I'm like, okay, I'm putting you in my A team. You guys are the guys who I can take you to the very top if or as far as your body will allow.
Yeah, no, not necessarily about lifestyle, but more on the bodybuilding side, the athletes that you're trying to take to that level. What do you think most people that are trying to get to that level misunderstand most about coaching?
As far as the athletes, what they misunderstand most about coaching.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's a tough one. I'd say they probably. I don't know. I don't know if I can answer that one.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, I think I'm trying to think. I don't know coaching, but just in terms of like, is there anything that they don't see from your perspective of kind of like you said about the diet and being honest with you, like about them not following your programs or stuff like that.
I see. So yeah, I guess a lot of them, it's hard because for me as a coach, I've done it enough times that I can kind of step back and see big picture. So
Yeah.
a lot of the things I'm doing is like, this is phase, and then we're going to do it this way. I don't always put that up front for the client, so they don't understand sometimes. Okay, why are we doing this? Why are we starting? Can I just go right to this? And I was like, listen, that's not necessary. We want to exhaust this resource before we go to the next one. We don't, otherwise, if we're doing everything up front, then what do we do in 6 weeks when we still need to, progress and you've already pulled out all the stops, kind of a thing.
Yeah, kind of like what you were talking about before of wanting that instant results
Yes.
versus having to actually work to get there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like as a coach, for me, what I tend to do, especially if we're in prep, is there's always phases to it, and not everyone's phases are the same. It's not like everything is the same for everybody, but there's a certain point that we'll start at, okay, we're going to do certain things with the diet. We're going to tighten it up. We're going to do certain things with cardio. And then when we hit certain points, that's when we make adjustments. It just doesn't, it makes sense to me to let your body max out before we go to the next thing a lot of times than just throwing it all in.
Yeah.
And sometimes as the clients, they don't see that big picture unless I spell it out for them, or I don't say in a bad way, but if I don't let them know, okay, hey, this is the reason why we're only doing this, and this is when we're going to get to this, and then sometimes they think, okay, well, he's not pushing me as hard as he needs to, or those types of things.
Yeah, they have kind of like a tunnel, dude.
Right. Yeah. Exactly.
What do you want Team DarkHorse to stand for in 10 years?
In 10 years, I hope to still be putting champions out, and I want it to be earn its reputation as a one of the top teams in the country, hopefully. Yeah. I don't have a big team. I don't have a bunch of coaches working with me. It's really me and right now I have one coach that I have. She's an IFBB pro, just won the nationals, Jess, and we're pretty much the two coaches right now. And I do have an assistant in Texas who kind of works with me as well. He's also an IFBB pro. But I don't have a lot of coaches because I take it very personal. It's got to be done a certain way, and I have my name on it, so I have to make sure that we're all on the same page.
Yeah, that's one thing I admire about you, is that getting to learn about you, is I can see that it's not about the money for you, like you said, but it's about leaving a stamp and leaving that legacy.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's always been that. Money's great, but I don't know. It's just as a kid, I was always thought that was cool, looking back and seeing people, from, who's ever going to forget Muhammad Ali, who's ever going to forget Michael Jordan? These are the greatest of all time. I wasn't the greatest of all time, but, that was what I strive for my whole life. I'm going to be remembered that way. And hopefully in my bodybuilding career as an Olympian and as a national champion and as a coach for Team DarkHorse, putting out champions, it's like, that's all those things are very important to me.
Yeah. You said you've been here in Albuquerque since you were 2, right?
Yeah.
So what do you want Albuquerque and this city specifically to remember you as?
As the pioneer, the guy that did it first, the guy that did it when nobody thought it could be done, as the best out of the state, which I think, currently I can say that I've accomplished the most. There's some good guys coming up, and I love seeing that. There's some really good younger guys that I think will make it to the Olympia. One guy specifically, he's national champion. Only other national champion bodybuilder out of the state other than myself, Julian. Yeah. Good dude, really good physique, a lot of potential, good shape, and I think he'll get there. But I want to be remembered as the best and the first.
Yeah, I love that. What do you want your athletes on your team to carry forward, after you retire and get out of the sport fully?
I want them to keep that legacy, that mindset, the dark horse mentality, put in the work, work quietly, work behind the scenes. Don't broadcast, don't showboat. Just let your physique, your hard work do the talking, and let that build your confidence and your character and your strength. I think that's important to me. It's from the time I was a kid. I told you I was a shy kid, so it was never really, oh, I can talk the most shit. It was always like, well, let's see what happens when we get out on the field or we get on the track. I can't out talk you, but I'll smoke you when it comes time. And that's kind of the mindset I want my athletes to bring.
I like that. Yeah, that's good. What do you think is one of the lessons in your life up to this point that took you the longest to learn?
The longest to learn. One of them would be balance for sure. I've gotten a lot more balanced, and realized that certain things I could have been a little more balanced as a kid, but you don't know it. All you know is, this is what got me here, and this is the only way I know to be. I can't sacrifice it under any circumstances. And then now that I retired, and even for a while toward the end of my career, I realized, okay, this isn't going anywhere. I didn't have to make myself, but at the same time, it's I don't regret the mindset, But balance is probably one of the biggest things I can say I've learned, finally over the years.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a hard thing, especially being a young man and dedicated and just wanting to work hard and make something of yourself.
Right.
It can be very challenging.
Yeah.
What do you think is a mindset or a lesson that you feel responsible to pass on to future generations and future athletes and everyone?
Like a mindset would be, again, kind of just don't be the one who's doing the most talking, be the one that's in the trenches doing the work. That's what builds you. That's what builds confidence. That's what builds character. If you've done everything you possibly can leading up to the thing, you can't help but feel like you're going in with a good chance. I never really went into any of my shows. I mean, the ones where there's been times where I could have done things better, but for the most part, I never went in feeling like, oh my God, because I've done everything I can do. It's like break whoever can beat this, then they're a badass because I know what I did.
Yeah, I like that. If this was the only interview that someone ever saw of you, what is the one thing that they should take away from it?
That it's worth it, but it comes with a lot of adversity, a lot of difficulty, a lot of hardship. But if you want it, you're gonna you got to do what it takes.
Well, yeah.
And as far as you say, what did they take away from it about myself?
Yeah, about yourself.
About myself, I guess I don't know. I never even thought about that really. Yeah. I want them to know that I'm a good guy. I'm a friendly guy. I love the sport. I love bodybuilding with a passion. It's been my entire being for most of my life, and at its core, it's something I'll never, it's an art form. It's a sport. It's so many things, and it's character building, and it's saved me. It saved my life as a kid. There was a lot of things that I was into that who knows where I would have ended up. So I can say that this and the discipline of it and the structure that it requires pulled me away from things that I was doing that probably wouldn't have landed me in a good place.
Yeah, I like that. I want to start doing a segment on this show towards the end where it's like just rapid fire. So I'm gonna ask you about like 20 questions, just 1 or 2 word responses.
Okay.
Sound good?
That sounds good.
Cool. All right, let me get here. So the first one is most overrated fitness advice.
Most overrated fitness advice. You're stumping me with these things here. Pass. Let's come back to that one.
Okay, no worries. Most underrated habit.
Most underrated habit is consistency.
Consistency. There you go. Yeah. Hard work or patience?
Patience.
Patience. Talent or discipline?
Discipline.
Discipline. Best exercise for building confidence?
Squats.
Squats. There you go. I like that one. Biggest prep mistake?
Biggest prep mistake, changing too many things.
Yeah. Biggest coaching mistake?
Biggest coaching mistake would be cookie cutter. In other words, giving everybody the same thing that works for you, not realizing everyone's different.
One word for Olympia?
Best of the best of the best. That's 3 words.
That's okay. 3 words works. Best of the best. One word for legacy?
Looking for legacy. Team DarkHorse.
There you go. I like that one word for discipline?
Word for discipline. Discipline. What would you? One word for discipline.
Nah, that's a hard one, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, you can skip that one.
Okay.
Best traits in a client?
There it is. Discipline.
There you go.
Yeah.
Worst traits in a client?
Inconsistency.
Inconsistency. A competitor needs more of what? Belief or structure?
They need more structure.
Structure. One thing that every man should master in his life?
Themselves.
One thing that social media ruins?
Reality.
Reality. That's a great answer. That's a heavy answer. Yeah. One thing that young lifters need to hear?
Marathon, not a sprint. Take your time. Enjoy the process.
Yeah. One daily standard that never gets compromised, that you never compromise?
One daily standard, I would say, I don't even know how this fits, but structure.
Structure.
You've got to have some form of structure, otherwise it's chaos. You don't have any direction.
Yeah, like a plan for your day.
Yeah.
What makes someone dangerous?
I find that a lot of times I see that the quiet ones are the ones that are dangerous. But what makes someone dangerous? That tenacity, the willingness to work behind the scenes, the hunger, and I guess I could say a lot of times the fire that comes from difficulty in life.
I like that. What makes someone fake?
Fake would be what makes them fake. In other words, how to identify them as fake, or just what
Is something that you would tell people not to do this, otherwise they're being fake.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So, too much talk. Too much talk without the action.
Yeah, I like that. Well, before we wrap up, I wanted to ask you, is there anything that I didn't ask you that you feel like you really want to share with people?
Well, I think you covered most everything. I'm trying to think all the way back to the time I was a kid growing up. I think you covered most aspects of my career.
Good. That's good. I'm glad.
Right on.
Do you have a final message for people that you want to leave them off with?
I just kind of want to say, surround yourself with the right people and give 100%, and then be appreciative of those same people when you get there, because that's important, having the right circle.
Yeah, because when you get there, if you don't take care of those people, then you have to go find more people, and that's oftentimes hard when you have success.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You gotta give the love back, and support them in whatever it is they're doing, because that's bodybuilding is a selfish sport, but it's not the only thing, and you've got to respect that whatever anyone else is doing is every bit as important. And if they're just supporting you in this crazy thing that we do, then we gotta give that back.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Well, that's all I got for you. Thank you so much for coming on, man.
Of course. Thank you. I appreciate the interview.
Yes, sir. Of course. Thank you guys so much for watching the show today. It was
a blessing for me to hear about JoJo and his story and to learn the knowledge he has. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you guys have not been to Ironverse training facility yet, make sure that you guys come and check it out. We're the gym redefining the fitness industry in Albuquerque, New Mexico. But other than that, we'll see you guys on the next episode.